July 24th, 1860. The Neues Palais in Potsdam, Kingdom of Prussia. Inside the magnificent walls of one of Europe's most powerful royal residences, a baby girl drew her first breath. She was named Victoria Elizabeth Auguste Charlotte, but the world would know her simply as Charlotte. The eldest granddaughter of Queen Victoria, sister to a future Kaiser, Duchess of an ancient German duchy. But this is not a story of royal grace and dignity. This is a tale of betrayal, blackmail, and sex scandals that rocked the German Empire to its very foundations. A princess who kept a secret diary filled with devastating secrets. A woman who threw parties that became legendary orgies. An aristocrat who may have orchestrated one of the most notorious blackmail schemes in European history. Welcome to the story of Princess Charlotte of Prussia, Queen Victoria's most scandalous granddaughter, a woman history tried to forget. From the moment she could move, Charlotte was trouble. While other royal children learned to curtsy and smile, Charlotte bit her nails until they bled. She tore at her clothes with such violence that her dresses were in tatters. Her mother, Princess Victoria, known as Vicky, watched in horror as her daughter descended into what appeared to be nervous fits. The solution? Tie her hands together. Force her to wear gloves day and night. Stand her in the corner until she learned to control herself. This was not mental illness being addressed with compassion. This was a princess being broken into submission. Queen Victoria herself wrote that Charlotte seemed easier to manage than her mother had been. But even Britain's longest reigning monarch noticed something was wrong. The atmosphere of Charlotte's home, she noted with concern, was not the best for a child her age. Charlotte's governesses reported something unprecedented. They had never encountered such difficulties teaching a royal child. She couldn't focus. She couldn't learn. Modern historians have speculated that Charlotte may have suffered from undiagnosed learning disabilities, perhaps dyslexia or ADHD, conditions that in the 1860s were simply labeled as willful disobedience. Her relationship with her older brother Wilhelm was volatile from the start. He was the golden child, the future Kaiser, born with a withered arm from a difficult birth, but destined for greatness. She was the difficult daughter, the problem child, the one who embarrassed the family. But it was her mother, Vicky, who delivered the deepest wounds. The Princess Royal had been Queen Victoria's favorite child. Brilliant, cultured, fluent in multiple languages, she expected nothing less from her own children. Charlotte was a profound disappointment. Vicky called her daughter wicked. She spoke openly about Charlotte's wicked qualities and hoped that marriage might at least prevent her from causing harm. As Charlotte entered her teenage years, she developed a reputation that would define her life. She was, according to those who knew her, the royal family's most mischievous flirt. She gossiped viciously. She befriended people only to betray their secrets. She was, in modern terms, the Regina George of the Prussian court. And she desperately wanted to escape. The year was 1877. 16-year-old Charlotte was on a carriage ride with her brother Wilhelm and their cousin, Prince Bernhard of Saxe-Meiningen. According to the story that became legend, Wilhelm drove the carriage recklessly fast. Charlotte, terrified, clutched Bernhard's arm. Their eyes met, and just like that, she decided she would marry him. Was it love? Perhaps. Was it a calculated escape from her mother's criticism and her brother's shadow? Almost certainly. Prince Bernhard was 25 years old, 9 years her senior. He was a veteran of the Franco-Prussian War, an army officer with intellectual interests, particularly in archaeology. He was also, by all accounts, weak-willed. The perfect husband for a young woman who wanted freedom, not partnership. Vicky prepared her daughter's trousseau with mixed feelings. She wrote to Queen Victoria expressing hope that at least her wicked qualities will not be able to cause any harm once Charlotte was married. It was less of a blessing and more of a prayer for damage control. On February 18th, 1878, in a double ceremony that also saw Princess Elizabeth Anna of Prussia married, Charlotte became Princess Charlotte of Saxe-Meiningen. The Prince of Wales attended. The Duke of Connaught attended. King Leopold II and Queen Marie Henriette of Belgium graced the occasion. It was a royal spectacle worthy of the Prussian Empire. The newlyweds established themselves in Villa Liegnitz, near the Neues Palais, then purchased a villa in Cannes. This second decision enraged Wilhelm, who viewed France as an enemy nation. But Charlotte had gotten what she wanted: distance from her family and the freedom to live on her own terms. Their Berlin home became legendary. The city's most powerful aristocrats gathered there for dinner parties and wild game nights. Wine flowed, secrets were shared, and Charlotte took mental notes of everything. She kept what we would now call a burn book, a diary filled with family secrets, critical observations, and devastating gossip about everyone in her circle. It was a weapon waiting to be deployed. And Charlotte had no idea that this diary would eventually destroy her relationship with her brother forever. In 1879, Charlotte gave birth to her only child, Princess Feodora, Queen Victoria's first great-grandchild. But motherhood held no interest for Charlotte. She neglected her daughter in favor of Berlin's social scene. Feodora was raised by nannies and servants, eventually becoming a long-term houseguest at her grandmother Vicky's home, Friedrichshof. Queen Victoria noted sadly, "She is really a good little child and far easier to manage than her mama. The atmosphere of her home is not the best for a child her age." Charlotte didn't care. She had parties to attend and reputations to destroy. Sometime in the late 1880s, Charlotte made a catastrophic mistake. She lost her diary, not misplaced, lost. The journal containing years of family secrets, vicious observations about relatives, and enough ammunition to embarrass the entire Prussian royal family fell into the wrong hands. And those hands delivered it directly to Kaiser Wilhelm II. Imagine the scene. The German emperor, Charlotte's own brother, reading page after page of his sister's private thoughts, her contempt for the family, her criticism of his wife, Empress Augusta Victoria, known as Donna, her observations about court politics and private scandals. Wilhelm never forgave her. The diary revealed Charlotte's true nature to the one person whose opinion mattered most for her social survival. The punishment was swift and decisive. Charlotte's husband, Bernhard, was transferred to a regiment in Breslau, effectively exiling both of them from Berlin society. Wilhelm, who controlled Charlotte's allowance, made it clear they could leave the country if they wished, but without royal honors. They would be stripped of privilege. For a woman who had married to gain freedom, Charlotte found herself more controlled than ever. Wilhelm held the purse strings. Donna, the empress, held social power, and Charlotte's reputation, already scandalous, had taken a nosedive. But Charlotte was not one to submit quietly. If her family wanted to play power games, she would show them exactly how those games were won. Empress Donna heard a piece of particularly juicy gossip. Karl August Freiherr Roeder von Diersburg, a court official, had been left by his wife, and Donna came to what seemed like an obvious conclusion. There must have been an affair with Princess Charlotte. Charlotte fiercely denied the allegations, but Dona demanded she fire von Diersberg or face exposure. Charlotte refused to comply. She would not be bullied by her sister-in-law. And then Prince Bernhard did something remarkable. The weak-willed husband everyone had dismissed stood up for his wife. He accused Dona of being an arrogant bully who tried to control all the Prussian princesses. He criticized the Hohenzollern family for their attempts to keep every woman under their thumb. He threatened to resign his army position and leave for Meiningen with Charlotte, declaring they were above such filth. In the end, von Diersberg and his wife returned to court united, proving there had been no affair. But the damage was done. Charlotte's relationship with Wilhelm, already destroyed by the diary incident, was now beyond repair. Banished from Berlin society, Charlotte headed to Romania, where she continued her tradition of stirring trouble by bad-mouthing her brother to King Carol I. She even helped arrange the marriage between Marie of Edinburgh and Crown Prince Ferdinand. But when Charlotte tried to ensure Wilhelm would never pay a state visit to Romania, the king discovered her manipulations, and she was no longer welcome in Bucharest either. Charlotte was running out of places to cause trouble. But Germany's biggest scandal was still ahead of her. Before we continue with the most shocking chapter of Charlotte's story, if you're enjoying this journey into royal scandal and hidden history, please take a moment to like this video, share it with fellow history enthusiasts, and subscribe to Echoes of Hidden Tales. We bring you the stories they didn't teach you in school, the betrayals, the scandals, the taboo moments that shaped our world. Now let's talk about the Kotze Affair, the sex scandal that rocked the German Empire. January 1891. Jagdschloss Grunewald, a hunting lodge just outside Berlin. Princess Charlotte invited 15 members of Germany's most elite aristocracy for what was advertised as a private gathering. Among the guests, her cousin Friedrich Karl von Hesse, her brother-in-law Ernst von Schleswig-Holstein, court official Leberecht von Kotze, and Charlotte von der Decken, Countess of Hohenau. What happened that night would become one of the most notorious scandals in German imperial history. The party descended into what contemporary sources carefully described as sexual excesses. In plain language, it was an orgy, group encounters, same-sex relations, the kind of behavior that would destroy reputations if it ever became public. And then the next morning, the blackmail letters arrived. Each participant received detailed anonymous letters describing exactly what they had done the night before. The letters included pornographic drawings illustrating specific acts. The level of detail was shocking. Only someone who had been present could have written them. As rumors spread through Berlin's highest circles, the victims made a decision in 1892. They would hand censored versions of the letters to the police. The investigation concluded that the author must have been one of the 15 participants. Someone at that party had betrayed them all. Suspicion fell on Leberecht von Kotze, the emperor's master of ceremonies. He was known for gossip, criticized for being overly feminine due to his bright clothing and love of court intrigue. In 1894, police confiscated ink blotters from his office that allegedly incriminated him. He was arrested and taken to prison so secretly that even the prison officials didn't know they'd be hosting such an exalted guest until the royal carriage arrived. But there was a problem. Von Kotze wasn't the author. A handwriting expert determined that von Kotze had not written the letters. In fact, the letters may have been written by a woman. Von Kotze was released after a court-martial acquittal, but his reputation was destroyed. and he wanted revenge. Von Kotze challenged Baron Karl von Schroeder to a duel. Standing 10 paces apart, they shot at each other repeatedly. Von Kotze killed Schroeder. The scandal now had a body count. Wilhelm II sent von Kotze to a comfortable military prison for 2 years, more of a gesture to propriety than actual punishment. But who had written the letters? Who had orchestrated one of the most elaborate blackmail schemes in royal history? Historians Wolfgang Wippermann and Tobias Bringmann argued in 2010 that Princess Charlotte was the most likely culprit. She had been at the party. She had a history of gossip and betrayal. She kept detailed records of people's secrets, and the handwriting analysis suggested a woman. Charlotte never admitted to anything, but her reputation as the person who exposed the Grunewald orgy followed her for the rest of her life. Life in exile became Charlotte's new reality. In Breslau, far from Berlin's court, she learned to ride a bicycle, a scandalous activity that the Empress considered indecent. Charlotte ignored her. She spent winters in Cannes, smoking cigarettes incessantly, hosting smaller gatherings of those who still found her company entertaining. In 1898, her daughter Feodora married Prince Henry XXXIII Reuss in Breslau. Feodora wore white satin with her mother's wedding veil, one of the few genuine connections between mother and daughter. But Kaiser Wilhelm II was notably absent. He was still furious about Charlotte's involvement in yet another scandal. On June 25, 1914, Charlotte and Bernhard finally ascended to power as Duke and Duchess of Saxe-Meiningen. They had waited decades for this moment, but their timing couldn't have been worse. Days later, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were assassinated in Sarajevo. The world plunged into war. Bernhard was sent to the front. Charlotte remained behind, and her health, always fragile, began to collapse completely. She suffered from severe kidney pain, boils, and edema. The only relief came from morphine. Modern medical experts believe she may have suffered from porphyria, a hereditary condition that causes neurological symptoms and was common in the royal families of Europe. On November 10, 1918, Duke Bernhard was forced to abdicate. The German Revolution had ended the monarchy system. They were no longer Duke and Duchess, just private citizens in a country that had rejected royalty entirely. Less than a year later, on October 1, 1919, Princess Charlotte died in Baden-Baden, Germany. She was 59 years old, a chain smoker who had battled illness her entire life. She was buried at Schloss Altenstein, the summer residence of the Dukes of Saxe-Meiningen. Her death passed with little fanfare. The world was rebuilding after the Great War. The age of empires had ended, and Charlotte, the scandal-plagued princess who had terrorized German high society for 4 decades, faded into obscurity. So what are we to make of Princess Charlotte of Prussia? Was she a villain? A victim? A woman struggling with undiagnosed mental health issues and learning disabilities in an era that had no compassion for such things? Or was she simply a product of her time, a royal daughter with no real purpose, no genuine power, who found meaning in chaos and scandal? The evidence paints a complex picture: a child who was punished rather than helped, a teenager who found attention through manipulation, an adult who weaponized secrets for entertainment and possibly revenge, a woman whose only daughter called her difficult and whose own mother called her wicked. Charlotte was involved in the Kotze Affair, where aristocrats and imperial family members were accused of sexual misconduct through anonymous letters in 1891. Whether she was the blackmailer remains unproven, but historians point to her as the most likely candidate based on circumstantial evidence and her established pattern of behavior. In today's world, we might diagnose Charlotte differently. Anxiety disorder, learning disabilities, perhaps even borderline personality disorder or bipolar disorder given her extreme behaviors and lifelong struggles. We might see a woman who was crying out for help in the only ways she knew how. But we must also acknowledge the harm she caused, the reputations she destroyed, the friendships she betrayed, the daughter she neglected, the man who died in a duel because of a scandal she may have orchestrated. History often forgets the difficult women, the ones who don't fit the narrative of virtuous princess or tragic victim. Charlotte was neither and both. She was messy, complicated, destructive, and desperately unhappy. And her story reminds us that behind every crown, every title, every portrait in a palace, there are humans, flawed, struggling, and far more scandalous than the history books admit. Thank you for watching this episode of Echoes of Hidden Tales. If you enjoyed this deep dive into royal scandal, make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell so you never miss our explorations of history's most captivating hidden stories. Next time, we'll uncover another tale they didn't want you to know. Until then, remember, the truth is always more scandalous than the legend.